welcome to the Light Gate. We are coming to you from the beautiful town of New Orleans, Louisiana at 107.7 FM and from on the United Public Radio Network. And we're also on the United UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We're having a really cool night. We're on Roku, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. We're on a whole bunch of different things. If you can't find us one way, try us another. And I just want to hand it over to Preston because I'm very excited about this show tonight. It's really good. Go, Preston.
Thanks, Dolly. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight on the Light Gate, episode 25. I am your host, Preston Dennett, author, researcher, and my lovely co-host is, of course, experiencer Dolly Safran, subject of the book, Symmetry. Got an awesome guest tonight, so I'm super excited. And I just want to give a shout out to all you guys in chat. Really appreciate the super chats, you guys. Thanks so much. So yeah, thank you, Dana Matthews. And oh my goodness, I'm just so grateful. So here's Jenny. Hello, Jenny. And here's Dana. Hello, Dana. Thank you so much for joining us. Scuba Maru. And David, you guys are so awesome, always showing up every week. We truly appreciate it. So there's hi to Janice. Hello, Susan. Susan's one of the people who I interviewed. She was a previous guest on the show. Hi, Nancy. Thanks for joining us. Got a nice big crowd today. I'm not surprised. Thank you, Namaste, for the wonderful donation. It really does help quite a bit. And who else do we have here?
Louise.
Goodness, we've got a lot of people.
And Kathleen and
Ruth Kleiber.
Yeah. Hi, Ruth. And Renee is in here tonight.
Christopher, awesome. Oh, Rad Peanut. Hello, Rad Peanut. Thanks for joining us. You guys make this show so much fun. Hi, Michael. Thank you very much. Lunar Dove. Oh, wow. We got a big crowd tonight. I think we've got a really good guest, so maybe that is why. Thank you, Dana, very much for the super chat. Truly appreciated. And again, thank you, Terry D. So let me just get to our guest because I could say hi to you guys all night long, and I will. Kayleen White, hello. Thank you, Jenny, so much. You guys are very kind. But let's just get started because we do have an amazing guest tonight. Someone I've known about for quite a while because doing research in this field, you're going to hear about Steve Boucher, and that is our guest tonight. We're super happy to welcome him to the show. He's an AutoCAD draftsman who lives in St. Catharines, Ontario. He's also a very accomplished musician, a singer, and a fine artist. Wait till you see some of the drawings he's done of his ETs. They're amazing. Now, Steve has had experiences with non-terrestrial beings since he was just a little baby. Now, most of his experiences were buried in his subconscious mind for many years, but early on, he began to have brief flashes of conscious memory, but only after walking into a bookstore, and instead of buying one of Carlos Castaneda's books, The Eagle's Gift. I love Carlos Castaneda's books, by the way, but I actually got much more shifted into UFOs. And he ended up picking up Budd Hopkins' book, Missing Time, instead. Felt somewhat compelled to, actually, as he writes in his amazing book. So after reading the book, Steve wrote to Budd Hopkins and told him about the memories he was having, because, of course, in the back of the book, Budd invited anyone to write to him. And Budd kindly contacted Steve and invited him to come to New York, stay at his art studio in Manhattan for a week. And Steve accepted the invitation. It was during that amazing, eventful week in 1984 that he underwent 3 hypnosis sessions and would later undergo more, which revealed that he had had repeated visitations from short, gray-skinned beings, approximately 4 feet high with large eyes and large heads, a description we've heard many times. So after that, Steve returned to Canada, went to a UFO Symposium in Toronto, and met up with a UFO group called CUFORN. That's the Canadian UFO Research Network, They've done lots of amazing work in this field. Now, they've since disbanded, but at the time they took over the case and did a thorough investigation of Steve's experiences, and they scheduled several more hypnosis sessions for him. And they published the results in the CUFORN Journal. Now, Steve's case was also reported in the MUFON Journal, the Mutual UFO Network, and the Flying Saucer Review. So these are leading publications. But to protect his identity at the time, CUFORN gave him a pseudonym, Jack. However, Steve has decided that now is the time to reveal his identity to the public because he feels, like many contactees, I think, including you, Dolly, that the story needs to be told. Now, Steve has remembered many more details, and more experiences have surfaced since the initial investigation took place. So we have a lot to talk about. I know Steve has an amazing connection to nature and animals. His artwork is absolutely incredible. We do have his links in the description. But Steve did write a book called Beyond the Extraterrestrial Firewall, which, by the way, does have a foreword by Canadian researcher Grant Cameron, who I really respect as a researcher. He's done really great work. But what's so cool about Steve's book, Beyond the Extraterrestrial Firewall, is it's quite rare for its kind. There are not a lot of books out there written by experiencers who've been there, done that. So that alone makes this book really special, but it's done very well. It's still relatively new, published a couple of years ago. It's got over 4 stars on Amazon, hundreds of reviews, and an amazing book. So I'm super excited to have Steve join us tonight, and I will just bring him in. There he is. Hi, Steve.
Welcome.
Thanks so much again for joining us. It's a real honor. I'm super excited.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I first heard about you, Steve, when I was writing a book, Not From Here, Volume 4, not too long ago. And I was researching cases of extraterrestrial hitchhikers.
Mm-hmm.
I ran across a couple of cases from RD6 Killer Clark, who had one case in South America, another in New Mexico. I know Brad Steiger had a couple of cases. I found another one in California. And of course, doing in-depth research, I came across your case under a pseudonym, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that's one of your major encounters, so I'm super excited to talk about that. But, I mean, there's lots to talk about. I thought we would just start with how it all began for you, as a young kid, and how this came to be such a big part of your life.
Well, there's a couple of places I could begin, but where I first discovered that I was a contactee was when I bought Budd Hopkins' book, Missing Time. And I read the book, and I found that some of the cases in it were triggering some memories in me. And I wasn't sure if they were memories or if this was like a dream. And one of those memories involved my dad, where I had an encounter with my dad. And so at the end of the book, as you said, there was a paragraph from Budd Hopkins that said, if you want more research done and you feel you've had some experiences, you can contact me here. So I thought, well, I'm going to ask my dad if he remembers any of the incident that I'm remembering that I had with him. I was remembering these fragments consciously. So I thought, if he verifies this and he remembers these things, then I know it's not a dream, and I'll write to Budd Hopkins. And so I went into the living room. My dad was sitting there on the couch reading the paper, and I asked him if we could talk. And he said, yeah. And so I started to describe the experience that I remember having with him. And I guess I was about 4 years old when I had this experience. And my dad and I were coming back from somewhere at night. I'm not sure where we were coming back from. And it was dark, and it was kind of a dirt road or a gravel road, I think. And in those days, the cars used to have like a shelf behind the back seat. And when I was a kid, I used to climb up on that shelf and lay down on it, and I'd look up through the back window and I could see the stars, you know. So I was looking up there and watching the stars, and I saw one was moving, and it seemed to be following us. And as I was watching it, I felt like it was trying to communicate with me, and
Wow.
it was getting closer and getting bigger. And when it finally got so close that I started to wonder about it, and I climbed over into the front seat, and I said to my dad, "What's that light out there?" And he said, "What light?" And I said, "That light." And I pointed out the window to, by this time, it was just above the treetops, and it was tracking our speed and following us. And when my dad turned and looked and he saw it, he went into like a panic mode. And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Shut up, leave me alone." And he was, I could see he was visibly shaken by it, because he normally wouldn't talk to me like that. And so I was sitting there watching, and he had his foot on the accelerator, and he was trying to outrun it, but you can't outrun these beings.
Not easily, no.
So it shot ahead of us and started coming down in the road in front of us. And we had to stop the car. And he had the headlights on it, but it lit up the whole road. Like, you know, it's almost like daylight. And he managed to gain his composure, and he turned to me and he said, "I don't know what these people want," but he says, "I want you to stay here in the car and don't get out. Don't look over the dashboard. Just stay here and wait for me, and I'll be back as soon as I can get back." And so he got out, and there were two beings that had got out of the craft, and they were standing facing us. And my dad said, "I'm going to go and see what they want." And so he started walking towards them. And the one being that seemed to stand out more than the other, I think he was probably the leader. And so my dad went and he positioned himself in front of this being so that the being couldn't see me in the car.
Wow.
But the other being had a clear view of me. So, you know, my dad was standing there talking to this gray being. It was a gray being with the large heads and the big black eyes. And to me, it didn't seem that strange, because when you're 4 years old, everything is new to you, you know? And so it didn't bother me that much. And I wondered if I knew these guys, you know, because I don't know if I had a memory of seeing them before, but I had a previous experience with these beings when I was about 2. And so I was looking over the dashboard at them and trying to figure out who they were and if I knew them. And I disobeyed my dad, got out of the car through the driver's side, and I started walking up to him. And he was talking to the being, and he put his hand behind his back like this, and he made this motion, like, get back, you know. And you can get away with a lot when you're only 4 years old, you know. So I came up behind him slowly, and the being that was talking to him just suddenly, he suddenly moved his head like that and looked over my dad's shoulder, and he saw me. And my dad knew he saw me. And I could hear his voice in my head. I couldn't hear him audibly, but I could hear his thoughts. And he was saying to my dad, "You seem to be concerned about the child." And my dad said, "Well, yeah," he said, "that's my son." And kind of laughed sheepishly. He used to do that when he was nervous. And then he turned to me and he said to me, "I told you to stay in the car. Go back and get back in the car and stay there. And I'll be back as soon as I can." And I said, "But I want to see, you know."
Sure.
And so the being said to my dad, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, "Would you like my crewmate to take him back to the vehicle for you?" And I don't know if he used that word, but I understood what he meant. And my dad said, "No," he said, "I have to go. My wife is waiting for us at home. She's going to wonder where we are." And he said, "I should get going." And the being looked at the other being and he nodded his head like that. And the other being immediately came over and took me by the hand and walked me back to the car. And my dad was just standing there kind of dumbfounded in the road watching this. And I could see he wasn't comfortable with this idea at all. But anyway, the being brought me back to the car, and I got in, and he got in with me and sat in the driver's seat. And he started talking to me telepathically, and I glanced through the front window, and I noticed that my dad and the other being had disappeared. So I assumed that they went inside the ship, you know. And so this being that was sitting with me, he put his hands on the steering wheel and he said, "What does this do?" And I said, "Well, that makes the car go this way or that way, whichever way you turn it." And then he looked down at the floor at the pedals and he said, "What do these do?" And I said, "Well, one makes it stop and the other one makes it go." And he kept asking me about the car, all these questions about, and he noticed the radio. And so he pointed to the radio and he said, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, that's the radio." I said, "You hear people talking and you hear music on it." And he said, "Oh, I see. Can you talk back to them on it?" And I said, "No, it doesn't work that way." So, okay. And he kept me busy, and basically what he was doing was babysitting while my dad was being abducted. You know, so after a little while, my dad came back out. Well, the being said to me, "What do you do during the day? Do you go to school?" And I said, "No, that'll be next year." And I know that I would have started school at 5, so that's how I know I was 4 at the time. And so my dad came back. He got out of the ship with the other being, and they were talking in the road. And I was enjoying the company of this gray that was sitting in the car with me because he was paying attention to me. And for a 4-year-old, that's important, you know. So anyway, he said to me, I'm going to have to go. And I said, well, can't you stay a little bit longer? And he said, well, maybe for a minute. And then the being that was standing in the road with my dad nodded his head again like that. And he said, now I do have to go. So he got out and he passed my dad in the road coming back to the car. And my dad got in and he looked, he was very quiet and he looked like there was a lot of stuff on his mind. And so when I started describing these events to my dad in the living room at home, I asked him if he remembered any of this. And he said, yes. He said, I remember going like that for you to get back into the car. He said, I remember that. And so I knew then that it wasn't a dream, that this really did happen to us.
Yeah, I actually have a picture that you gave to me. I want to pull up.
Yeah.
So is that about this age you were?
That's about the age I was, and with my dad there, and
Wow.
we had a little
Oh,
dog.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Amazing. So did he ever tell you what he remembered, or did he just remember part of it, or?
well, he remembered everything I told him up to that point, but there's something he didn't remember, is that once we started the car and the ship moved off, we could see it going over the trees and it was leaving, and the car started and we started to go home. And then a second incident happened where the ship came back a second time, and it did the same thing. It came down in the road in front of us. And I remember my dad saying, oh, what the hell did they want now? You know, and only one being got out this time. And he came over to the car and he motioned for my dad to roll the window down. And in those days, they used a crank. There were no electric windows. And so my dad rolled the window down a little bit. He said, what is it? And the being said, you forgot these. And he handed my dad his glasses.
Oh, wow.
He'd forgotten his eyeglasses on the ship.
Wow.
And I know from experience with these beings, they're very meticulous about making sure that you go back with everything you came with. You know, they don't want anything left behind, or, you know, have you wondering where something is. So they gave my dad his glasses back, and then we watched them leave again. And they didn't take off really fast. They just kind of coasted over the trees. And so my dad thanked them and he put his glasses on. We went home. And that's the second part there that my dad doesn't remember. He didn't remember it. And when CUFORN worked on my case, I told them about this. And they came and interviewed my dad, and they used to come on the weekends and visit with me and with my dad, talk to him. So anyway, that was one of the incidents I had when I was a child. I won't go into the earlier ones right now.
That experience, is that something you always remembered, or was that something that came back to you as an adult?
That came back to me as an adult.
Oh, wow. All right.
It was a conscious recollection, and it was triggered by Budd's book, Missing Time. That's what made me remember it.
Amazing.
And it came back in fragments. So anyway, when I went to see Budd Hopkins, he answered my letter, and he called the house, and he got my mother on the phone, and he told her who he was and everything. And when she told me Budd Hopkins is on the phone, I almost fell off my chair because I didn't expect him to call me personally. I thought he was going to maybe get someone else to do it, you know. And so I talked to him on the phone, and he wanted me to come to Manhattan to his studio there. He said, I strongly suspect that you and your father have had a UFO encounter. And he said, I was wondering if you could both come to Manhattan. And I asked my dad, and he said, no, I can't go. He said, I have to work. But I had a vacation coming up from my job. And so my mother agreed that it was okay if I go. And so I went, and I took what they called the sky bus. It was a smaller plane, kind of like I think it was a DC-10 or something smaller than the normal passenger jets. And I met a guy at the airport there. His name was Ted Boucher, and he was one of Budd's best friends. And
I know about Ted. He's done amazing work.
Yeah, he wrote a book with Isabel Davis about the Hopkinsville incident called Incident at Kelly.
Yep.
And
I've got it.
yeah, anyway, so he was holding up a bristleboard sign that said Budd Hopkins on it. So that's how I recognized him. And I went up to him, and he took me to Budd Hopkins' studio in Manhattan. He has an art studio there. He was an internationally famous artist. And the studio was fully equipped like an apartment. It had a bedroom and a kitchenette. And the rest of it was pretty much open space with a lot of Budd's paintings hanging on the wall. And the lady that used to do his hypnosis sessions for him, that did the ones in his book, Missing Time, her name was Dr. Aphrodite Clamar. And he had scheduled a couple of hypnosis sessions with her. He scheduled 3, and he scheduled me to go and see a behavioral therapist that was also working on some of his cases, but she didn't know what we had in common. And it was, he gave her this job of trying to figure out what these people all have in common. And he was bringing her abductees, and he didn't tell her what we were. And so anyway, yeah, that's Budd Hopkins on the left and Ted Boucher on the right. That's in Budd's studio, and you can see some of his kind of abstract paintings on the wall behind him.
Yep.
Yeah. So I went to 2 of the hypnosis sessions with Dr. Clamar, and they recorded them on cassette. And the third one, she wasn't able to do. She was sick that day, but she knew that Budd had enough experience that he could do the hypnosis session himself. So he did the 3rd session with me. But the first 2 sessions, she knew how to position the microphone and everything to get it all on tape. Bud didn't have the mic in the right place, and the third tape came out to be just kind of a blur. It wasn't clear, so I couldn't use it. But I came back from there with 2 cassette tapes, and I transcribed them when I got home. I wrote it all down, and the transcriptions of those tapes are in my book. And I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I had the foresight to do that, because the tapes vanished. I have no idea where they went. And
that's weird. I've heard that before.
Yeah. So anyway, CUFORN, the Canadian UFO Research Network, took over my case after that. They're based in Toronto, and there was a UFO Symposium going on in Toronto at the time with a lot of guest speakers, and one of them was J. Allen Hynek, and I was standing about 20 feet away from him, and I wish now, I'm kicking myself that I didn't go and shake his hand and introduce myself, but he was standing here talking to somebody else, and he had the pipe with him, you know, that pipe he used to smoke all the time. So anyway, CUFORN fixed me up with a hypnotist in Toronto who took over my case, and she didn't really understand what she was doing. She'd never worked with an abductee before. She's only worked with people that were trying to quit smoking or lose weight, you know. So she didn't really know what to do with me, you know. And Harry Tokars, one of the members of CUFORN, he suggested that she call Dr. Leo Sprinkle at the University of Wyoming. And he's worked with hundreds of cases of abductees and contactees. So she phoned him, and we were all sitting there in the office at the time, and he basically walked her through it, because they wanted to take me into a deeper state of hypnosis than she normally deals with. Like, he wanted her to take me into what they call the somnambulistic state. I guess it's a deeper form of hypnosis. And she was kind of afraid to go there, because most hypnotists don't like to work in that state, because weird things happen. So anyway, he talked her through it, and she did it. And she brought me into this somnambulistic state, and I started recalling a lot of incidents that had happened to me up to that point. And one of them, the one that I'm most known for, is the one I call the van incident, but it involved a band that I was in when I was about 17 or 18.
Okay, now before we get to that one, I'm wondering, what is it like to go under hypnosis? Because there's a lot of controversy surrounding it, and was it just? I mean, how was it for you? Did you?
I was quite comfortable with it. It's more like just a deep state of relaxation, and you're just listening to this person talking to you in a low voice, you know.
I actually have a picture of you coming out of hypnosis right here.
Yeah, that's what I looked like back then.
Yeah, you still look great.
Well, anyway.
So before you get to that other experience, because you had an experience at age 2, you said?
Yes, I had one at age 2. That was the first one that I remember.
I'm curious about that one.
Okay. Well, I had this little cart that my mother used to put me in when I was 2. It was like a little metal cart. They weren't made of plastic like they are now. Back then they were made of metal, and they had it had a metal tray on the front of it. And
A Taylor tot.
yeah.
Yeah, I had one. It's called Taylor tots.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'd move it with
Wow.
your feet, kind of like the Flintstones,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah. And it had wheels on it. And
Yeah.
my mother used to put me in this thing out in the backyard. And she always told me, stay around here. Don't go on the road. Don't go in front of the building. Just stay here where I can see you. And I had my puppy with me, sitting beside me. I don't know if I sent you a picture of that. I think there might be one.
I don't think I have it.
No?
Check. No.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's in my book. And I was out on this little cart, or Taylor tot, you call it?
Yep.
Yeah.
It
And,
starts out as a stroller, and
yeah.
then they take the thing off it, and it becomes what you push it around
Yeah.
with your feet. Yeah, Taylor tot. I have pictures of me in one. Yeah.
So anyway, I was out in the backyard on this thing, and I heard my voice, or I heard my name being called. And I looked around, I couldn't see anybody around, and I said, who is this? And they said, look at the bushes. Do you see the bushes? And I said, yeah. And they said, we're on the other side of the bushes, and we want you to come over here. And so I was used to just being on this gravel road, and I wasn't used to going across the grass, but I managed to make my way across there. And I came around the corner, and hiding behind the bushes, there was a saucer-shaped craft sitting on the ground again. And there were 2 beings there. And one of them called me by name. He said, Stevie, we've been waiting for you. And he came over to me and picked me up and lifted me out of this little stroller I was in. And they brought me onto the ship. And once they had me on the ship, the other being laid down on like a gurney sort of thing, and they laid me on a gurney kind of thing. And I think they attached wires to me. It's hard to remember because I was only 2, but I think they had me wired up, and they gave me an implant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where was it? Where was the implant?
Well, I'm not really sure, but I had one behind my left ear.
Yeah. You're left-handed, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Why do they put them behind the left ear, Dolly?
Well, they're supposed to put it behind the right ear if you're left-handed, but they never really realize we're left-handed until they realize we're left-handed, and they automatically put it behind the left ear. And they'll switch it later on when they realize that you're a lefty, because it's too easy for me to manipulate it and pull it out, which I did to mine. So yeah.
I'm just curious because I often hear people saying they get them in their ear.
Right behind the back of your ear. Yeah. Right in the fold of it where it comes into your head.
Well, this implant, I don't know if they gave me 1 or they gave me 2. But after they'd done that, they said, I said, what are you doing? And they said, well, he said, my friend here is going to get part of you, and you're going to get part of him.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no, I want to keep all my parts. I started, And so anyway, he said, it's okay. It's not going to hurt. You won't feel anything. And so afterwards, he brought me back out of the ship and put me back in this the little cart, and I could hear my mother calling my name. And so I came back around the side of the bush so she could see me. And when she saw me, she started shaking her finger at me, and she said, "I told you to stay in the yard here where I can see you."
Oh, wow.
And she said, "I was looking all over for you. I was worried that you'd gone on the road or something." And she said, "If you do that again, I'm going to take the fly swatter to you." I was terrified of the dreaded fly swatter. They used, she used to whack me with this thing when I misbehaved, and it
Oh, my
stuck.
goodness. Oh,
And,
no.
so
Yeah.
anyway, she
So
picked me
you
up.
were actually missing then for a period of time there.
I was missing for a little while, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And she picked me up and took me in the house, and she put me on the floor in the living room. And I had these blocks on the floor that were kind of like they had letters of the alphabet and numbers and stuff like that on them. They were wooden blocks, pre-Sesame Street education, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was playing with these blocks on the floor, and I heard the voice calling me again. And I looked around and I said, "Where are you?" And they said, "Go over to the couch, climb up on the couch, and climb into the window behind the couch." There was like a recessed window there. And so I crawled into that window, and I was looking around, and I said, "Where are you?" And they said, "Look up." And I looked up in the sky through the window, and I saw this bright light go across the sky. And I was very surprised, And I said, "Was that you?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Can you do it again?" And they said, "We'll do it again. We'll tell you when to look." And they said, "Okay, look now." And I looked, and again, the same light went across the sky. And I said, "How can you hear me?" And they said, "Because we can hear what you hear, and we can see what you see." And I said, "Can I see what you see and hear what you hear?" And they said, "Not now, but perhaps later." And I said, "What do you look like?" I'd already forgotten the first incident.
Wow.
And they said, "Look over at the doorway between the chair and the couch." And I looked over at the doorway, and I started seeing what looked like a holographic form of one of these gray aliens appearing in the doorway. And I could see through them. And I said, "Is that what you look like?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Can you come here?" And they said, "Not today, but later on." And I have like a little model here of what they look like,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I made this little model. So anyway,
They have blue skin then? Is that?
no, it's they had gray skin, but
Um,
for some reason the camera's making it look blue.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
In a blue jumpsuit?
blue jumpsuit. Yeah, and it had an insignia on the chest, on one side of the chest, and I didn't put it on the model because it was too small to get on there. But anyway, after I saw what he looked like, I said, "How can you see what I see and hear what I hear?" And he said, "Well, it's hard to explain, but I said, there was an expression my mother used to use when I got confused. She said, you've got your wires crossed." And I said, do I have my wires crossed? And he said, yes, that's a good way to explain it. I guess I let him off the hook,
Cute.
Yeah.
I get it. It's kind of like, communicating because you're
Yeah.
connected.
So after that incident happened, I got down off the couch and I was running into the kitchen to tell my mother, and she had the vacuum cleaner out and the hose was across the doorway where I was going, and I tripped on it and fell and I skinned my knee and I started to cry, and I went into the kitchen and my mom put a Band-Aid on it, and when that happened, it made me forget what I was going in there for. I'd forgotten.
Oh, wow. Because, someone's in chat saying, imagine trying to explain to your mom you were missing because you were on a UFO.
Yeah. I didn't even know what a UFO was then. But I'll tell you, though, those beings can communicate with children better than the parents can. Because when you're talking to your mother at 2 years old or whatever, and you can't speak yet, all you can do is kind of point and whine, or cry. They know exactly what you want and what you're thinking. They get right into your head. And so it's like a more advanced conversation because they know exactly what you're thinking.
Wow. That's very cool.
Yeah, you're wide open to yourself at that age. Your pineal gland is operating, properly. Very psychic at that age also. And so your higher consciousness, who you really are, is able to speak like an adult because you're ancient.
Right.
Actually, and you can have better conversations at that age with them. Yep.
Yeah, because you're not hindered by words.
Right.
So Neural Channels is asking, can you describe the symbol on the chest?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it looked like, but the way I remember it, it was like a chevron with 3 stars. And that came out in a hypnosis session with CUFORN. They asked me about that as well. They said, focus in on the symbol on their chest. And they said, zoom in on it. And he said, because I'm going to ask you to draw it later. And so I zoomed in on it, but I'm not sure if I had it accurate or if my brain was extrapolating what I thought it looked like, so I can't really say exactly for sure, but I drew what I remembered, and that's also in my book.
Yeah, I think actually you sent me a picture of that. Let me see if I can pull that up. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I think this is what you're talking about.
Yeah. On there, it looked like that, and there was sort of what looked like a ball or a globe with rings around it, like Saturn, in the center of it.
Wow.
And that was the best I could draw of it at that small a scale.
So is this what the gray looked like then?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an AI gray.
Later on,
yeah, AIs. They're autonomous individual. They're biological AI. In other words, they're not human like you and I, or biological. They don't have sentience as a being like we do. We have a spirit. They have none. And they're the workers for them. And the outfit that you're describing denotes it. That's AI.
well, later on, in the incident that I had with my band, I felt that these beings were had spirits. They had a soul, and I don't know if that's
How
what they
tall
were,
was he?
or if they were real
Yeah.
alien beings. But
If he was under 3 feet, in other words, they average about 3 feet tall or under. They're very slender, very skinny, like that. You're drawing him perfectly.
yeah,
That's AI.
okay,
Anything over 3 feet is a real gray, and they
Mhm.
can range from 5 feet, and the taller grays go over 6 feet, sometimes 7.5, 8 feet tall.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
So anyway, in the interest of time, I should probably go into the experience with my band.
Yeah, I'm super
I
curious
looked
about
at
that one.
Yeah, yeah. So I was about 17. I know I was underage and we were playing in the bars and they never questioned me, you know. The other guys were older than I was. Uh, yeah, that's my band. It was called Harmony Grove. Um,
Where did you,
guy,
in Canada?
yeah, the guy
Okay.
in the middle there replaced our bass player. He's not one of the ones that had the experience with us. The bass player left, and this guy replaced him. And I'm on the left there, wearing the satin shirt,
Yeah.
and I'm a little bit chubby there. Yeah. But anyway, this is a picture of a picture, so that's why it's a little bit distorted.
All right.
Yeah. The guitarist, which is the guy on the far right, um, he passed away a while ago.
I'm sorry.
And the only one still alive is the drummer, which is sitting in front there.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, we were playing at a bar in Niagara-on-the-Lake called the American Hotel. And we just finished a gig, and it was late. It was around 1:30 or so. We were packing up our stuff. And the drummer, I'll call him Sam, he came over to us when we were packing our stuff up, and he said, a friend of mine has invited us to a party in Vineland, I believe it was. Jordan or Vineland, they're very close together. And he said he was hoping we could go there and maybe play one set. But if you guys are too tired, I understand. He said, how do you feel about that? We said, yeah, okay, we'll go. And we were all hyped up, ready to go. So we drove to Vineland, and the guitarist's girlfriend knew the woman that had this house. And so we went there, and we decided to play one set for them. And there was one of those telescopic pole lamps was in the living room, and we had to take it down to put the drums in that spot. And later on, when CUFORN investigated the case, we went back to that house, and I had drawn a floor plan of it, and it matched the floor plan perfectly. And we even found the divot in the ceiling from the pole lamp, you know. So anyway, we played a set, and there was a guy there that nobody seemed to be bothering with him. And at the end of the set, he asked me, he said, are you guys going to St. Catharines? And we said, yeah. And he said, would you mind giving me a lift? He said, I was supposed to meet a friend of mine here, and he never showed up, and he was my ride home. And so nobody here knew me, and they just kept feeding me drinks. And he says, I'm a little bit tipsy right now. He was half in the bag, you know. But anyway, we packed all the equipment up and put it in the van. And the guitarist, I'll call him Tom, he was driving. So this guy asked him, can you give me a lift to St. Catharines? And he said, well, you've kind of been drinking a bit, haven't you? And he said, yeah, but he said, well, I'll give you a lift anyway. He said, but you'll have to sit on the floor with the equipment. And it was a cargo van with just one side window. And we'd packed all the drums in there and the guitars and the amps. And so we left the party. And there was Tom, the guitarist, Sam, the drummer, the bass player, I'll call him Calvin, and the guitarist's girlfriend, I'll call her Anne Marie, and the hitchhiker. And so, and myself. And we were all packed into the van there, driving to St. Catharines. And we went to get onto the Queen Elizabeth Highway, but the gate was closed. So we couldn't get on there. And we thought, well, no problem. We'll just take the service road down to the next junction and we'll get on it there. And so that's what we planned. And when we started going down the service road, all of a sudden, we were talking in the back of the van, and the hitchhiker, I found out later his name was Alex, and he was trying to pick up Anne Marie. Excuse me. He was trying to pick up Anne Marie, but she was dating the guitarist, you know. And all of a sudden, the guitarist, he stopped the van. And we said, why are you stopping? And he says, well, you better take a look at this because you're not going to believe me. So we looked over the seat, and in the parking lot of a restaurant that it's now called the Lake House, it's been through several owners. In this big expanse of the parking lot, there was a saucer-shaped craft sitting on the ground, and it had lights around it. There was red lights around the perimeter, and it had recessed portholes above that, also going around the perimeter. And on the bottom, it had what looked like little searchlights, different colored searchlights, panning back and forth over the parking lot. And we were a bit of a ways away from it. And he said, what do you think? And I said, it looks like maybe it's a prop for a movie. And we were trying to come up with ideas of what this thing was. And the drummer said, well, why would they be making a movie at 4 a.m? Because by this time it was about 4 a.m. And so the guitarist says, well, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to go by that thing. So he said, I think I'll turn around and we'll take the back road home instead of the highway. And so we all agreed that we thought that was a better idea. And so anyway, he started turning into the parking lot to turn the van around. And suddenly the van started moving, and he wasn't driving it. I said, I thought you were going to turn around. He said, well, look, he said, I've got the wheel cranked over as far as it'll go, and we're not turning. And I said, well, put the brake on. He says, I'm trying. He says, I've been pumping the brake and nothing's happening. And at that point, I realized that I couldn't feel the little bumps in the road that you'd normally feel when you're driving. So we were raised above the ground, maybe just a few inches or so, but we levitated above the ground, and we were moving toward this thing at a pretty fast speed. And we were approaching it so fast that I was bracing for impact because I thought we were going to hit it. And when we got up to about 30 feet of the craft, from the craft, we came back to rest on the road, but the van wouldn't start. And we're all sitting there panicking, and everybody's talking all at once, and we're yelling and we're panicking. And so the drummer, he was sitting in the passenger seat. He suddenly became the voice of reason. And he turned around and he said, everybody just shut up. He said, if we stay low, we don't say anything, we don't talk, we stay quiet, stay low, maybe they'll leave us alone. And so that was the only plan we had. And so we decided to do that. So we're sitting very quietly in the back, and I was terrified. Everybody was terrified because we didn't know what was happening to us. And
Steve, I have to interrupt you for just a second. I'm so sorry, but we need to take a very quick station break.
Sure.
So hold on while I just shout out some call signs.
Okay.
I want to let everyone know that you're watching The Lightgate. I'm your host, Preston Dennett. My lovely co-host is Dolly Safran. Our guest tonight is Steve Boucher, and we are very happy to be streaming live on the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM in the beautiful city of New Orleans. Also the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3. We are also very happy to be on Roku as well, YouTube, and Facebook. And this is episode 25, so we're finally getting our sea legs with this show. And yeah, super excited to have you on, Steve, and so sorry to interrupt because this is, I know, going to be an amazing story. But you were describing how you're all sitting there laying low,
yeah,
and trying to keep calm.
and then I heard the drummer said, "Oh no!" And I said, "What is it?" He said, "They're getting out." And I said, "I want to see." And he said, "No, stay low in the back." You know. And I said, "What do they look like?" And he said, "They're just little guys." And I said, "Little guys?" And I was afraid we were going to get into a skirmish with these beings. So I grabbed the mic stand for to use as a weapon if they happen to get in. And yeah, that's basically what they look like. And so anyway, we could hear them around the van, and they were trying the doors. We could hear them trying the doors. And one of them went by the one window that we had in the back, and I saw the side of his head, and because their eyes kind of curve up around the sides of their head, they've got a greater peripheral vision than we do. And so as he went by, he was looking into the van, and it surprised me. And I said, "Did you see that?" And everybody went, "Shh." And I said, "Yeah, but did you see that?" And Anne Marie said, "Yes, I saw it." And so the hitchhiker, he was sitting in the corner in the back of the van, and he's just suddenly started looking around at us. And then he reached over and he opened the back door of the van and pushed the door open. And there were 3 gray beings there in single file facing us. And one of them came right up into the van. And I grabbed the mic stand. I was going to whack him with this thing, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. And then I could hear him in my head. When I looked at his eyes, I could hear him speaking to me. And he said, "We're sorry we had to temporarily paralyze you because you were thinking violent thoughts, and I was concerned about my safety and the safety of my crew." And he said, "But we don't intend to hurt you or harm you in any way. We need to run some tests. So I'd like to take 3 of you to the ship, and we'll run the tests quickly, and then we'll bring you back and you can be on your way." And so he looked at the bass player and he said, "I'd like to take you." And then he looked at the hitchhiker and he said, "And you?" And then he looked at me. And when he looked at me, I looked at the floor. I didn't want to look at his eyes because that's how I could hear him. And I could only look at the floor for so long. Finally, I looked back up at him and he was staring right at me and he said, "And you?" So he said, would you follow me, please?" And he turned around and he started to go back out. And he was, height-wise, he cleared the ceiling of the van. This is a regular stock van. It had no cap on it or anything. And he cleared the ceiling by about 3 or 4 inches. So that'll give you an idea how tall he was. And as he was leaving, his foot got stuck in the snare drum stand, and it fell over, and the snare drum rolled out the back of the van. And one of the beings picked it up right away, and he started looking at it. And when I got out, I came face to face with this being, and he was like about a foot away from me. And I heard in my mind, "Oh my God, are you ever ugly?" And I don't know if that was me thinking that about him or him thinking that about me. Anyway, he handed the drum to the leader, and the leader said, "Is this yours?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Who does it belong to?" And I said, "Well, it belongs to the drummer. It belongs to him." And I pointed to the drummer in the passenger seat. And the leader said to the other being, "Go and get him." And so he went around to the side of the van. He came back with the drummer. Now the drummer was one of the ones with us as well. So there were 4 of us. The guitarist and his girlfriend remained in the van. They didn't come with us, but he handed the drum to the drummer and he said, "Is this okay? Is it damaged?" And he said, "No, it seems to be okay." And he laid it on the floor of the van. And I had a bag with my instruments, my recorders in it. It was like a burlap bag with a drawstring that I used to keep them in. And I wasn't going to leave it behind in the van. I decided to bring it with me. So I took it with me, and he made us all line up along the side of the van. And he told us all to turn to the left and face the back of the person in front of you. So we did that. And there were 4 of us. And one of the beings, the leader, went into the front. And the other 2, I guess, were in behind us. And so we were like in a conga line, sort of. And he said, "We're going on the ship." And he said, "We're going to go on all as one unit, all together as one unit. And he said, when we start to move, don't look to the left or the right. Keep facing straight ahead.
Huh.
And when we go into the ship, he said, don't touch the hull. And so anyway, I was a real disobedient kid. I had to test everything, you know. And so we started moving all together, and our feet weren't touching the ground anymore. We were off the ground and moving in a straight line. And I looked to the left and we stopped. So I looked straight ahead again and we started going. And I said, oh, that's how it works. And I turned to the right and we stopped again. And when I faced forward, we kept going. And we approached the opening to the craft. It was on the right. And we turned all together and kind of turned on an angle to go up into the opening. And there were steps there. I remember them as corrugated metal steps, but we didn't walk on the steps. We floated. And I could see the black leather jacket of the drummer in front of me. And he was a pretty tall guy. And he banged his head on the
Oh no.
going in. Like, you know, and he said, oh, crap. And the leader immediately turned around and said, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm okay. But he wasn't happy at all. You could see he didn't want to be with us. And I took it as an opportunity I wanted to touch the UFO to see if it was what it felt like. And so with my ring finger of my left hand, I just gently grazed the surface of it, and it felt like metal, like aluminum, and it didn't feel unusual in any way. And it turned out that a couple of weeks later, I got a huge planter's wart on that finger. And it took me weeks to get rid of it. I was putting free zone on it every day, and it
Wow.
it took ages to go away. But anyway, so when we went into the ship, they immediately separated all of us. And there was one being for each of us. And the drummer, the being he was talking to, was kind of arguing with him. And what they wanted us to do was to remove all our clothing and put it in a pile on the floor. And they wanted to do some tests on us or something. And he was refusing. He said, no, I am not going to do that. And he argued for a little while. And finally, the being gave up and kind of patted him on the shoulder and said, it's okay, I respect your decision. But will you wait here for the others? And he said, yes. So he stood there with this being and waited. And meanwhile, the other beings had brought us over to these benches that were curved. They followed the contour of the ship. And we sat down on these benches and started to disrobe. And I noticed the hitchhiker, when I first remembered this, I didn't remember who it was, but he had long underwear on. And I thought it was kind of unusual. It was cold out. It was getting close to winter. In fact, at the party we played at, there was a Christmas tree already. And so the one being that I had was the leader, and I came to know him as Rigel. That's the name I call him. But he brought me over to this other area of the ship, and there was a countertop with cupboards, and he had me sit on this countertop. And I was sitting there in my underwear. And he went over to talk to one of the other beings that had a metallic tray, and there was something on it wrapped in a towel, and he unrolled the towel, and there was all these instruments that looked like dental instruments or surgical instruments on it. And I was thinking to myself, I've got to get something, because nobody's going to believe me. I've got to get something like an artifact or something. And there was nothing around that was loose that I could take. So my hand came to rest on the cupboard under the countertop I was sitting on. And I felt the knob of this cupboard. And I thought, I wonder if this thing unscrews. So I started unscrewing it, and sure enough, it was getting looser. And it came off in my hand. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it because I didn't have any pockets to put it in or anything. So I thought, well, maybe I can stash it under my armpit or something. But anyway, I was holding it in my hand. And the leader came back to me and he said, we're ready to do the test now. And he looked at me and he kind of tilted his head and he said, what have you got? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you took something. And I realized that he could see every thought that I was thinking, and you can't hide anything from these guys. So I held it out. I opened my hand and he took the knob out of my hand and he looked at it and he said, you can't keep this. And the other being that had the tray with the instruments on it said, why not let him keep it? What harm can it do? And he looked at the other being and he said, we're not supposed to let them keep anything.
Wow.
And that told me that they were working under some kind of strict protocols.
Yep.
You know? And
Too
so
bad.
he brought like a gurney over to me. And I don't know if it was on wheels or what, but he pushed it over to me and he said, can you slide off the countertop onto this and lay down? And I said, yeah. So I slid off and I got onto the gurney, and I believe it had like a thin mattress layer on it, but I can't be absolutely sure. So I was laying on this thing, and at one point I sat up because they brought the instruments over to me. And there was one instrument in particular that looked strange to me. It was kind of rectangular shaped and black. And it reminded me of a handheld piece from a contemporary phone. And he picked this thing up and he said, I'm going to show you how this works. And he held out his arm and he took this thing and shone it on his arm. He turned it on and it shone like a green light on his arm. And wherever this green light landed, I could see his skeletal structure underneath it, under the skin. And he said, now I'd like to try it on you. And I said, is it going to hurt? And he said, no, it's not going to hurt, but it might tingle a little bit. And he said, can you hold your arm out, please? So I held my arm out. And he shone the light on my arm. And I was surprised that not only could I see the bones, but I could see the muscles and I could see the veins and the arteries. And I could even see my heartbeat pulsing. And so I was really surprised at this thing. I'd never seen anything like that before. And he said, now we want to use it to take a look in your stomach. And he said, can you lay back? And so I laid back down, and he wheeled me over to this place where above me, there was like a big circular wheel. It looked like concentric circles. And I don't know if it was a helix or if they were separate concentric circles. But this thing, it was a light, and when it came on, it started pulsing toward the center, and it was drawing my attention to the center. And I kept staring at it, and I started to feel myself getting really tired. And I said, I don't want to look at that thing anymore. And he said, no, look at it. Look right into the center. He said, it's very important. So I stared into the center of it, and next thing I know, I was out like a light. I was unconscious. And when I woke up again, I don't know how long I was out, but they were rolling up the instruments in the towel. And he said, I'm going to take you back to the bench and you can put your clothes on, and we're done with the testing. So I went back to the bench and I started putting my clothes on. I had my bag of recorders and sitting on top, and him and the other being came over to us while we were getting dressed, and the drummer was still standing at the doorway with the other being, fully clothed. And so he said, we have a few minutes now. If there's any questions you want to ask us, now is the time. And so I started thinking, gee, what am I going to ask them? And one of the guys asked, where are you from? And he said, do you know the stars at all? And we said, well, not really. And he showed us the star map on the wall. And he said, well, it probably won't mean anything to you, but we're from this area here. And I can't be sure, but I think he was pointing to the constellation of Orion, and specifically the three stars on the belt of Orion.
Wow, that's coincides with Dolly's story as well. That's
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Go on. This is fascinating.
So the next guy, the bass player, he said, do you have any bases around here? And he said, yes, we have one right out here. And he pointed through the porthole to Lake Ontario. Oh. And then he came to me, and they both looked at me like they were waiting for my question. And I said, what is the true religion on earth? And they both kind of looked at each other, surprised by my question. And the leader said, why would you ask something like that? And I said, well, you guys are obviously a lot more advanced than we are, socially and technologically, and probably spiritually as well. So if anybody would know what the true religion on earth is, it would be you guys. And he looked at the other being, and he said, there is no true religion on earth. And he said, that's the end of the questions. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, you can't just leave me hanging like that. You know, like, what do you mean there's no true religion on earth? And he said, I'm sorry, the questions are over. We probably told you too much already. And he wouldn't answer anything else after that. And so we were all dressed, and we walked back over to where the drummer was, and the guys started leaving. And this time they were walking down the steps to the outside. And I was the last person in the lineup, and it was my turn to go. And he put his hand on my shoulder, the leader, and he stopped me and he said, wait a minute. He said, I'd like to talk to you a little more.
Wow.
And at that point, I blacked out again. It was like I lost my consciousness. And the next thing I remember, I was standing on the ground outside the ship, looking at him up in the doorway of the ship, and he was kind of silhouetted in the doorway with this dull light behind him. And I could see these big black eyes staring at me. And he was telling me something. And I started becoming conscious, and I was trying to remember what he was telling me, because it was like a beautiful story of some sort. And almost like when you have a beautiful dream and you're trying to remember it, and it's drifting away and drifting away, and you can't remember what you dreamt about. It was kind of like that. And I felt this tremendous love coming from him. Like it was like a wave of love that I've never felt from a woman or from anybody in my life like that. And it was cold outside and my face was itching. So I went to scratch my cheeks like that, and they were soaking wet. And I realized that I'd been crying. You know, he told me something that really moved me, and it had me crying. And so I was trying really hard to remember what he told me. And he could see I was struggling with this. So he came down and walked up to me. And he said, "Wasn't there something you wanted to show me?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "There was something you wanted to show me." And then I realized that it was my recorders. I'd been thinking that earlier, that if I get a chance, I'm going to show him these things. And it was a distraction technique that he used to stop me from trying to remember what it was he told me. But the last thing I could remember was he said, "And you'll be a great help to your family and friends in the future." But he gave me some kind of a mission, but I don't know what it was. I don't remember it. So he distracted me by asking me about my recorders, and I took them out and showed them to him, and I played a little bit for him. And then I handed it to him, and he took it, and he did something really strange that I never expected him to do. I thought he was going to hold it up to his mouth to try to play it. And it was headed that way, but instead of putting it in his mouth, he held it up to his nostrils, and he blew into it, and he got a sound out of it. And I thought, that's really weird. Why would he do that? Why wouldn't he put it to his mouth to play? And I found out later on from the guys in CUFORN, when they worked on my case, they had shown me a manual that they had of alien autopsy. And it was of these gray aliens. And it was written by Dr. Leonard Stringfield. And it said that they found out that this being didn't have any digestive system like we had. The mouth was basically a pocket that stopped here. And they had one organ that did the job of the liver and the lungs and the heart. And the mouth wasn't connected. They had no digestive system like we know. So they couldn't breathe through their mouth. They could only breathe through their nose. And that explained to me why he held the recorder up to his nostrils instead of his mouth.
Yeah, you're describing perfectly an AI. They're absolutely AI. They're biological, and that's how they operate. And That's perfect description of them. Yeah.
So anyway, I decided to give him one of the small recorders, like the kind that the kids play. You know, it was a soprano. Yeah, and I just decided to give it to him.
Yeah.
And I said, "Would you like this as a souvenir?" And I held it out to him, and he took it out of my hand, and he said, "What is the souvenir?" And I said, "Something to remember me by. It's a gift." And he said, "That would be fine." And he put it on his belt, and it just stuck there like it was magnetized, but there's no metal in it. And I couldn't understand why it was sticking to his belt. And I started thinking to myself, gee, I hope I can get another one of those little recorders, because I really like the sound of it. And immediately he took it off his belt and said, "Would you like it back?" And he handed it back to me. And I said, no. I said, "You keep it." I said, "I want you to have it." He said, "Okay." And he put it back on his belt. But I realized then again, he was reading my mind. He could tell exactly what I was thinking. And he said to me, actually, it's probably in some alien museum somewhere up in some other.
No, the pilot of the craft probably took it.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Well, anyway, he said, "Would you like me to take you back to your vehicle?"
Yeah.
And I said, "No, that's okay." I said, "Am I going to see you again?" He said, "Oh, yes, you'll see us again." And so I walked away from him, and I felt like I belonged with them. It was a really strange emotion I was feeling. So I went back to the van, and the back doors were open. And I climbed in, and as I was climbing in, I noticed everybody inside was like frozen in what looked like a state of suspended animation. And as soon as I climbed in, they all came to life immediately. And the drummer was saying something. He said, "We've all agreed on something." And he said, "We need you to agree to this too." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "We are not going to tell anybody about what happened here." And I said, "No way, no way." I said, "People have got to know this stuff is going on." And he said, "No, we are not going to tell anybody. And if you tell anybody, we're just going to deny it, and you'll look like a fool." And I was really unhappy. I was angry at them for taking that stand, you know. And I noticed something else. The hitchhiker wasn't there.
Yeah, I'm curious about this part.
Yeah, he disappeared. And I was wondering where he was. I thought, it's a cold night, and that's a long walk to St. Catharines from here, So I was kind of worried about him. And anyway, we closed the doors and we left and started heading back to St. Catharines. And all the way there, I kept hearing them in my head going, "You're going to forget this. You're going to forget all about this." And I was having a mental argument with them in the back of the van, going, "No, I am not going to forget this. I'm going to remember this all my life." And when they got me home, my parents were asleep. I had a key, and I let myself in. I went into the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. And I took out a pencil and paper, and I wrote down everything that happened that I could remember in point form on this paper. And I took the paper, tore it off, and I put it in my top dresser drawer and went to bed. And the next morning, the paper had disappeared. And I found it again later on, because I have it now. I have it there's a little briefcase that I keep the CUFORN manual and the MUFON manual in there, and this little piece of paper with the events that happened to me that night. So,
What year was this? This instance? What happened that year?
well, it
What
was
year?
sometime around 1972 or 73, somewhere around.
Okay. Right.
And anyway, fast forward to the future. I don't know how much time we have left. But
We still have 20 minutes or so.
okay. I went to the Alien Cosmic Expo. It was in Brantford at that time. They moved it to Toronto later on, but I went there, and they had an experiencers group, and where you could get up on the stage and describe your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. I got up on the stage and I started to describe my experience. And Grant Cameron was in the audience. There was about maybe 200 people or so. And Grant came up to me. They stopped me about halfway through my story. They had to break for lunch, but I got to tell the rest of it later. And Grant came up to me during the break and he said, "I know that story." And I said, "How could you know that story? I've never told it to anybody." And he said, "I remember it." He said, "When CUFORN did the investigation on your case, and they had given you a pseudonym of Jack T." And he said, "I called them and I tried to get a hold of them to find out what your real name was. I wanted to come and talk to you." Because he says, "I'm doing research on bands that have had UFO experiences."
There's a lot of them too.
Yeah.
You seem to love musicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he said, "I know your story." He said, "I've been looking for you for years." And that was the beginning of my friendship with Grant Cameron. And he was the one that inspired me to write the book. He kept telling me, "You've got to write a book about these experiences." And so I said, "Okay, I'll write a book." And it took me about 3 years to write it because I got sick during it and had to postpone it for a little bit. And and then I went back to it and I proofread it and I fixed it all up, and I did like a list of books that had similar incidents at the end of it. And Grant's publishing company published it for me. Jessica Barnaby, she read it over, and she's done a lot of Grant's books and books for other people like Paula Harris. And so they published my book for me on Amazon, and it's been doing pretty good. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback on it, and every month they deposit my royalties into my bank account, and so I may write another one. I don't know. At this point, I don't think I will, but there's always a possibility. So I got somebody on Facebook approached me, a guy named Alex, and he said, "I believe that I was the hitchhiker that you guys picked up that night." And at first I was kind of dubious, But then I said, were you wearing long underwear that night? And he said, yes. He said, this friend of mine was supposed to take me home, and he was supposed to meet me at the party, and he never showed up. And he told me to wear long underwear because there was going to be a bonfire out in the backyard. And so that answered my question of who was wearing the long underwear that night. The second thing I asked him is, what happened to you? Where did you go? And he said, the ETs took me home. They dropped me off at my house. And
Wow.
he said it woke a lot of my neighbors, because they had these bright lights, and a lot of the neighbors could see this thing. And the next day, he got a visit from the men in black. He said they came to his house, and he said they had a car that was like a big Cadillac, and it was black. And he said it had no logo on it, no manufacturer's logo, and the windows were darkened out on it. And they threatened him and his dad because his dad had been telling everybody, oh, my son was abducted by a UFO and all this. And so they told them to shut up about it. Don't talk about it. And he's had other experiences as well. So when he contacted me on Facebook, I questioned him about a lot of stuff because I wanted to make sure that it was really him. And he said, he told me he'd been trying to pick up Anne Marie, and she was dating the guitarist, and he was mad at me. And he said, so I didn't go home with you guys. I went with the beings instead, and they dropped me off. And he said, I think they took me to their base. And so anyway, when he started describing the conversation and that he was trying to pick up Anne Marie, I had never told anybody that because I didn't remember it myself. But when he started telling me, I was remembering. Everything he told me happened in the van. I remembered.
Have you met him?
Hmm?
Have you met him since then?
No.
Talk to him
No.
face to face.
He wouldn't meet me. I tried to get him to meet me. In fact, I was hoping I could get him to come on a podcast with Grant Cameron and explain what happened, because he was the only viable source that could back up my story, and he disappeared. But when I had these conversations with him on Facebook, I created a Word file and I copied and pasted all the dialogue of our conversations in this Word file. And I'm so glad I did that now, because I had a feeling he was going to disappear. And when I looked for him again, there were several blank profiles with that name, no picture, no wall, no comments, no friends list, nothing. It was just a profile made with that name, and it had the typical Facebook icon for a male. That's all. And I never got a hold of him again. I tried and tried, couldn't find him.
Sometimes people work for the government and they're contactees, and they get in a lot of trouble for that.
Yeah, I figured maybe there was an NDE involved, like a non-disclosure agreement.
NDA, yeah.
And the other thing I kind of wondered about is maybe he worked in the underground tunnels. There's a whole world down there under the surface of the earth, and these tunnels, and there are underground cities and things like that, from what I'm learning about.
Yep.
but he never contacted me again. So that was the end of that.
Mhm.
Well, here's a question I'd like to pop up from one of the people in chat, which I'm also curious about regarding your father. This is from Janice. She's asking, what's your dad's occupation? And he had experiences before when he was young, because this is something that is often generational.
I
Sometimes,
believe that it was generational. I believe he had other experiences, but he wouldn't talk to me about it. But I know he had some other experiences that he wasn't telling me about. He was a millwright by trade. Started out as a welder, and then he got his millwright ticket. He worked on machinery. And when I asked him one day if he remembers what they showed him on the ship, he said, they showed me a bunch of images of inventions throughout history, of old inventions coming up to new technology. And he said it was like a history lesson of all the
wow,
inventions.
that's
And
fascinating.
I think they picked him specifically for that reason, because he was into mechanical things and he was a millwright, you know.
Cool.
That's one of the things I noticed, because I was doing analysis of who's getting contacted, and there are a lot of musicians and artists, inventors as well, environmentalists, social workers, human rights activists, people who are doing good work.
Yeah.
So,
well, a lot of left-handed people are creative people. They're artists.
Very much so. Yeah.
We use a
Born that way. Yeah.
Different half of the brain than other people use.
So Christopher Harmon is asking, did you ever put on any albums of your music?
Well, I did a CD of my own music, but it never went anywhere. I probably got a couple of copies of it kicking around here somewhere, but I never got it published by a regular publisher. And also, I've had a couple of different bands since then, and we've done covers of other people's material.
What type of music do you personally like to play?
I like all kinds of music. I like meditation music. I listen to that a lot. I like a lot of bands like I was big on Genesis. I went Supertramp, Foreigner, you know. A lot of these bands I saw when I was younger. April Wine. But I've played with pianists. The recorder goes well with piano. And I played with guitarists, a lot of different guitarists. The disadvantage to playing a recorder is that they don't play chords. They can only play melodies.
Melodies, yeah.
And so I have to play with other musicians, like a guitarist or a pianist. And the advantage is that you learn a heck of a lot of songs because they all have a different repertoire.
Right.
And so it increased my repertoire of songs that I could play. I played with country western bands. I played with jazz bands. I played with...
do you ever do Celtic?
Yes. Yeah.
Totally love Celtic
music.
Yeah, I love Celtic music, yeah.
So here's another question, which I think is pertinent, and this is from Rad Peanut. She's talking about how you can become very emotional after a sighting or depressed, or what was your emotional reaction to all of your experiences? How did it affect you?
Well, it was buried in my subconscious till about 1984 when I went to Manhattan and met Budd Hopkins. And, went into the hypnosis sessions there, and I asked Dr. Clamar to give me a post-hypnotic suggestion to help me remember all the incidents that happened to me, but to remember them over the months at my own comfortable level. And she did that, and it worked. And I remembered a lot of incidents that took place since then. But I don't remember any happening after 1976. That's not to say that they didn't happen. It just means I didn't remember them. One thing Budd Hopkins told me was once your case is investigated, they stop coming around. You know? And he didn't seem to know why, but he said once your case is investigated, they don't come around anymore. And I think that's probably because they like to work on a clandestine level with your subconscious. And they'll work with your conscious mind as well, but they make you forget that. They push it into the subconscious.
Well, I have a serious question to ask you then. Since you've come out and you're out there and you're using your real name and you've written a book, do you feel like, because you made the statement before that you have a mission or something that you were supposed to be doing? Do you think maybe you're following that now?
Yeah, well, that brings up the question from Garrow, and thank you for the really generous super chat. He says, in your book, you discuss the mission. Can you talk more about this?
Well, I believe writing the book was part of the mission, but I also think that there's, well, it might sound kind of cliche, but there's kind of a starseed light worker kind of mission where I'm here to help Earth ascend to the next level and to help people to find themselves spiritually,
Wake up, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So there's that part of it as well. But there could be another part to this mission that hasn't happened yet that I am not aware of yet.
I agree with you. Yep.
Very cool. Well, we're running down to our last few minutes here. We still have like 3 minutes or so. So is there anything else you want to add before we have to, unfortunately, say goodbye?
Well, I didn't quite finish the other question, but the way it affected me was I had a massive shift in my spiritual life. I had grown up as a Christian. I left the church, and I study a lot of the ancient records, and like the Enuma Elish, the Astrahasis, the Gnostic material. I read a lot of these books, and
me too. I'm right there with you.
yeah, and it has improved my spiritual life tremendously. And I don't follow any religion anymore. Now I believe in unity consciousness, that we're all connected, that we're all one. And
I
have a question for you then. You just led me right to it.
Make it quick, Dolly. We're in our last minute.
Get ready. Have you ever heard them say, you are us, we are you, we are one?
There's a phrase that sticks in my mind. We are all one in the one that is all.
There you go. Close enough.
Wow.
That's it. Definitely.
Yeah. So well, I have a group on Facebook that you can contact me there. It's named after my book. It's called Beyond the Extraterrestrial Firewall. And my book is available on Amazon. I had a website, but I got rid of it. I'm going to eventually start a new one.
Awesome. Do that soon. I have a feeling it's going to uptick on you.
Yeah.
And with that note, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. This has been the Light Gate. We love you. We're definitely going to be asking you to come back again and talk with us because there's a lot more to uncover here. And we were coming to you tonight from the beautiful city of New Orleans at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you next Monday. Keep smiling and be happy. Night, night.
Bye now.